Welcome to Part 6 of the History of Final Fantasy. Like most long-running series of video games, there have been various spin-offs to Final Fantasy. Games that bear the name or the characters of the series, but are not numbered releases in the series. Also, like most other long-running video game series, the release rate of spin-offs almost seems exponential, with a few here and there at first, but now more spin-offs are released than numbered entries. And finally, like with most major series, the spin-offs themselves often have sequels and become their own series. Keep in mind, in this part we are only talking about spin-offs, not games that feature cameos by Final Fantasy characters. So that being said, we'll talk about those games next time. Unfortunately, there really are a lot of games here, so I can't go into too much detail on each one. And while I've tried to include a mention of every single Japanese mobile phone game, there is limited information available, and there's a lot of them, so I may have missed some of those. The very first Final Fantasy spin-off to be released is perhaps the strangest one of them all. As you've heard in this feature, Square had been looking for a way to break through into mainstream gaming in America, which did not embrace RPGs fully until the release of Final Fantasy VII. In an attempt to grab the attention and imagination of American gamers, they released Final Fantasy Mystic Quest for the Super NES. Mystic Quest was designed to be an entry-level RPG released at a budget price, but it received poor reviews, failing to appeal to the mainstream gamers and being considered substandard by RPG fans. Strangest of all, the game was later released in Japan under the title Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest, even though it was developed in Japan. European gamers got it under the title Mystic Quest Legend without the Final Fantasy branding. Square would shy away from spin-off games until after the release of 7, and the series became an international success, and hot on the heels of 7 came Final Fantasy Tactics for PlayStation. Ironically, it's probably the least likely game to appeal to mainstream gamers, as it's a turn-based strategy RPG, but it was released at a time when the name Final Fantasy was hot all over the world, and the game received massive praise and high sales. Ironically, it was developed by the same team who made Ogre Battle, a series that hasn't managed to break through into mainstream success and has been eclipsed by Final Fantasy Tactics and its sequels. Next up would be a dungeon crawler in the Mysterious Dungeon series. For those of you not familiar, the Mysterious Dungeon series is a series of dungeon crawlers in which you delve into large multi-level dungeons that are randomly generated. Each time you go in, you get a little bit stronger. The series often features characters from popular franchises such as Dragon Quest. The Final Fantasy version features chocobos, the large yellow birds that have become the mascot of the Final Fantasy games. Chocobo's Mysterious Dungeon for PlayStation, which was only released in Japan, set a trend of a long line of Chocobo-related games. The game got a sequel fairly quickly, Chocobo's Dungeon 2, also on PlayStation. This one was actually released in America, and you gotta give Square credit, they kept the 2 in the title without trying to put anything over on anybody. Next came Chocobo Racing on PlayStation, an obvious cash-in on the kart racing genre, similar to the ones for Mario or Mega Man. The game featured stock Final Fantasy characters. In addition to the typical Chocobo, there was a Moogle, a Black Mage, and such. And you could unlock a few Final Fantasy VII characters. The game got mainly poor reviews, however, mostly being seen as a second-rate Mario Kart clone. Chocobo Racing got re-released in Japan as Chocobo Collection, which featured the main racing game as well as Chocobo Stallion, an expansion on the breeding aspects of Final Fantasy VII, and Chocobo D-Dice, a dice-based minigame. Next came Chocobo on the Job, a bizarre occupation simulator for the WonderSwan, released in Japan only, of course. I'll be honest, I don't really have any information on that one. The dice game that was in Chocobo Collection got remake treatment as it was released as its own game, Chocobo A Game of Dice for Game Boy Advance. This one stayed in Japan, however. Next came one of the most obscure games, which I really have no info on at all, Choco Mate for Japanese mobile phones. Guessing from the title, I'd say it was a breeding game, but I really am just guessing.